This is where we finished at the end of the last part, and we are ready for some materials. Before we continue, do a check over though, because I looked inside my donut and I saw this, which shouldn't be here, obviously. So make sure you don't have any hidden meshes that should definitely not be there. You've only got your camera, your donut, your icing, and your light, okay? Okay, so materials. Let's do some materials. If we jumped into our render mode, that little button that I showed you on the first part that takes you into rendered view mode, you can see we've got a lamp and it's lighting our donut in a very depressing, cold gray. So let's give it a material. Down here, the little material tab, and then we're gonna hit new. So just like before, the one thing we're gonna change is the color. Let's make it a nice pink color. And that looks pretty good. The other value that you typically want to change for a lot of objects is the roughness value. So you can see the further I go all the way to the left-hand side, the more it becomes a mirror. So all the way at 0 is basically a mirror. And then all the way to the right is your most porous object, like a brick or something like that. Basically something that looks like it doesn't have a reflection, although everything does. The roughness is just merely dissipating that reflection everywhere, so it appears as though it doesn't. But anyways, so we're gonna go with like a 0.3, something like that. It's pretty good. And then for the base of our donut, we're gonna give it another material, and let's go with a nice orangey yellow, which we will change later on, so it won't matter anyway. But that's good. Great. Look at us. We've got a donut. By the way, we'll add some subsurface SSS later on to make this look a little bit more milky, but for now, this is good. Now we want to put our donut onto a marble countertop. So first of all, we need that countertop as a separate object. So Shift A, and the one we're looking for is again under mesh, and we're going to go with a plane. So a plane is just a square that's literally made up of 4 vertices. It's the simplest object, but the most versatile, that you use it all over the place. And I'm gonna make this look a little bit bigger. So let's just scale that out with S and then click. Okay, so we wanna make our donut rest onto the countertop. So if I selected my donut base and moved it up, well, there's a problem, right? We need to have both of these move together. So if you want to have one object basically attached to another object while still being its own separate object, you parent it. So the way we parent it is, first of all, you select the object that you want to follow the other object, so the child, and then you select the parent. So holding down Shift, I'm going to now click on the donut base, and then to parent, it's Control P. Okay, or again, if at any time you don't know what it is, just hit F3 for search, and then we can just type in parent. Now, by the way, with parent, you get a number of options here. The one you actually want is keep transform. If you just do object, it means if you've ever moved the object like off its base or whatever like that, it'll then like clear its position. So it's actually not the one you want most of the time. So it's keep transform. Now that I've done that, if you've done it in the correct order, you should be able to select the base and then move it, and the icing should go with it. If it doesn't, it means it's probably parented the other way. So again, make sure the object you want to follow the other one is selected first, and then the parent is selected last. Okay. So now I'm going to move that up along its Z-axis. So G, and then just a middle tap and pull it up till it's resting on my counter. Haha, lovely. Now don't worry about this looking like cartoonishly bad in terms of realism. I'm going to show you a button later on, which is just going to make this look phenomenally realistic. That's going to be in some later parts. But for now, this is fine just whilst we work and piece the scene together. So for our countertop here, we need to give it a new material. And then underneath the base color, you can select not just a color by clicking the color, but the little dot next to it, that little yellow thing doesn't look like a button, it is. If you click that, you get this this pop-up or pop-down in this point, which just gives you a number of options. And the one that we're looking for is image texture. So essentially, it's replacing that import from a flat color to an image texture property. And it's now black, and it's asking you what image texture. So we need an image texture. Now we could go to just Google Images and just find any old marble texture, download that. The problem usually with textures on the web is that what most people call a texture is not ideal for 3D. Most textures are good for websites, but for 3D, we need extra information to tell the 3D software how the material property looks. Like, how does it reflect light? What do the bumps look like across the surface? And all that information is never available on these sites. So to find those textures, you have to go to a separate dedicated website. And the website that I recommend is Poliigon. And the reason I recommend it is because it's mine. It's my website. That's why I recommend it. No, I started it 8 years ago because I was pretty dissatisfied with the quality of the texture websites that were available at the time. So I used my YouTube money to invest in a team and some high-tech equipment. We went out into the world and we scanned stuff to a very high quality standard. And over the years, we've grown it to include models and HDRIs as well. And obviously, a lot of this stuff is paid, but we also have a free range. And obviously, we're going to be using a free texture for this part. So this is the free texture. This is the one we're going to use. And first of all, although it is free, you do need to sign up for an account. So you can just sign up with Google. That's usually the easiest one. It's a couple of onboarding questions. I would like to actually know how you, are you a professional? Are you a student? That's kind of interesting to me to know that. And then when you get to here, you're just going to say continue with free account. But power through that, and if you click the link in the description, again, this is the marble, and we just want to hit download. And you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, it's downloading. It is a large size, but this is because it's 8K, and we've got maps at like 16-bit depth to get all of that accurate information there. But once it is finished, it'll just appear in your downloads. Then you just unzip the zip file as you would normally. And then finally, you should see some glorious high resolution images and ones with extra information like roughness. Very, very subtle, but will come through when we do the render. So back into Blender where we've got that image texture, we're going to click on open. Then navigate to where you unzipped it and then just click on the one that ends with COL in the name and then just hit open. And here it is. Okay. And it looks great up close. Only problem is, of course, look at that reflection. So bland, so fake. And as I mentioned before, fake is the enemy and you need to squash it by just adding variance. So that's where our roughness map is going to come in. And while we could try to add it in here, this section on the right-hand side, it's actually not where you do most of your material work because this is kind of like a simplified, dumbed down version. It doesn't really... It gets a little bit complicated when you try and add too many things to it because there's like too many menus and drop downs and all that kind of stuff. So instead, if you go to your shading tab at the top of the screen there, this will change the layout of the screen to something completely different we haven't seen before. And lots of windows, actually too many. I never actually need this one on the right-hand side. So where you just mouse over where you've got the divider and then just right-click and then say join areas. And then you want to join it to the left to close it. And then I'll do the same here because I've never needed those on the left-hand side. So I've just got my view at the top here and then this one here. And the reason, by the way, this looks different than what we had before is because this is the material preview, but you can change it back to what we had before by clicking that. So material preview, by the way, it's the same. It's a rendered mode, but it's using lights, a different light setup. Basically, just an HDRI, which is like a fake kind of light and reflection map, just so that you can quickly preview materials. And really, you could use either or. They both kind of show the material, but yeah, let's use this one. Okay, but the bit that we're looking for is here. So this section here is your node setup, and it's actually an exact duplicate of what we did over here, because this on the right hand side is the simplified version. If you're just doing like a quick change, you might want to use this, but over here this is what's actually happening to it underneath the hood, right? So you can see as I change this on the right hand side, that is also changing there, so they are linked. So the way nodes work is basically a left to right function. So we start over here with our image texture, it goes into our shader, which is the material for this plane, and then it comes out into a material output, and that's what is fed into the final shader. So essentially we could do anything, like for example, and this is one of the value of nodes, is between these two nodes, we could add another node. Like for example, I could hit Shift-A to add, again, same hotkey, works everywhere. And then I could add in like a hue saturation value node. And then I could change the hue of my marble to look blue, right? Or something else. So that's the power of nodes, and you could just keep going, adding in adjustments and everything you want. So nodes, very, very flexible. They do look daunting because they get all these like, squid looking lines going everywhere. But it's very, very convenient, very customizable. Okay, but we want to add something to our roughness so that we don't have a flat single value roughness, which is what that is currently. We want to use that map that we just downloaded. So one, you could hit Shift A and then add an image text this way, but actually we could also just drag out from that input there and then just do a release, and it'll now say, what do you want to add in this input? And we could type in image texture, color, and then hit enter. Then here, go to that same place that we unzipped it, and then we're looking for the one with roughness in the name. So roughness in the name, and then hit open. Okay, so this is better, right? You can kind of see we've got some detail there, but it doesn't look quite right. Something is not going right. It's because when you add an image texture, Blender doesn't really know what type of information it is yet, and by default it's looking at the color information even though there isn't really color there. So instead we need to tell Blender this is a special map and we're just looking at the values, right? So essentially the color space here, we need to change it from sRGB, where it's a standard photo color, to instead non-color data, or just non-color, I guess they've changed it. But now you can see that looks correct, right? So look at all that. We got scratches, we got smudges. It's infinitely more realistic than what we had previously. So beyond that though, we could also add in little tiny bumps, okay? So bumps are in a place you would not expect. There's not a bump value here. It's actually under normal. So normal, you hear that word a lot in 3D. It just basically means the face, which direction is the face pointing, right? So if this is your face of the plane, you're pointing this way, that's the normal, right? But you can change the normal information to kind of tweak it to pretend like there is detail in that, okay? Essentially, we can plug in a specialized map called a normal map. Okay, so we're going to drag out from that normal map and then release, and then image texture, that's the last used thing, that's the one we want. I'm just going to click color, then drop, and then hit open, go to that same folder, and then this is the one, the purple one. It's the weirdest looking map. You always know you're looking at a CG texture map directory because it's the purple one and it's got NRM in the name for normal. And hit open. And just like before, it's not going to be correct because it thinks this is a color image texture, just like for photos. So we need to change it again to non-color data. And now you would think that would fix it, but no, it looks even worse. What did we do? The problem is we need to convert this image texture into something this can read. So we need to put another node in between here. So the node is found under Shift A for add, then vector, normal map. So click and then just drop it here so it highlights between it, and then just drop it. And it will now finally be correct. And if I go full screen with control space, I didn't mention that before, but yeah, control space, and then you can go full screen, and you can see we've got very subtle little chips and divots across the texture along with those smudges, and it just looks way more believable. It means you don't have to worry about this part of your scene. It's just going to work, and you're going to get all that detail for free, and just makes life a little bit easier. But it is a lot of work. Like, what you've just made is a PBR shader, and yeah, it's a lot of work, all those little maps and everything, and having to know which setting is which. But it is a very common thing to learn, so that's why I wanted to include it in here. If I could plug my own website again, though, I will say we did hear you, because a lot of people say that. So we actually made an add-on called the Poliigon add-on, which I'll actually show you how to install later on, because that is actually important for 3D, because you use a lot of add-ons. But to plug it very quickly, it actually does all of that without you having to leave Blender. So it'll download the texture for you. There we go. See, it's downloading. It's actually faster through the add-on. And then once you've got it, you just hit apply, and then it will do all of that node work for you in the background, and it'll just apply it to the mesh for you. So you don't have to do all that all the time. And in fact, most people, I think, if you're working on big scenes, you're using libraries, you're using add-ons like this, so you don't have to do it all manually all the time. But it is important to know the process, so that's why I wanted to show it. But anyways, this was our material, and we are happy with it. Well done. Let's go back to the Layout tab, and now we're going to do one more thing. So you see our donut base here. Let's just isolate this donut for one moment here by hitting /, which I mentioned previously. Okay, when you're in /, this is isolate mode, which means it's literally turning off everything, including the lamp, which is why it's dark. But if you turn on material preview, then you get this. So this is okay. But if you look at real references of donuts, you'll see that it's typically whiter around the middle. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned before, the way it cooks, right? It's only like half submerged and then it's flipped. And it means that the bits that are closest to the surface are cooked less. So there's usually like a whiter part around the rim. And I mean, really, this is just an excuse to show you another part of Blender, which is texture paint. So at the top there, click the texture paint tab. And again, let's go into isolate mode with our donut there. Why are we not seeing? Okay, there we go. So what texture paint does is it lets you paint directly onto your mesh. But if we try doing it, you can see nothing's happening. And it does give you a warning at the bottom, missing textures detected. So to paint, you're painting into an image and the image doesn't exist yet. So we have to give it one. So go to the material tab. And then here where we got base color, we set it up as yellow, but we're actually just gonna override it now. So click that little yellow dot again and then say image texture. So now it's black. Doesn't have an image. So, and instead of clicking open, we're gonna click new. So we're gonna be creating a brand new image. And let's call this donut base. We could make this higher res if we want, but don't. This is more than enough for a donut base, that's fine. And this will just save us time. The color, this will just fill the, it'll fill the image for us with a flat color. So we're just gonna go for something pretty similar to what we had before, a nice yellowy color like that. And by the way, make sure you're all the way bright, otherwise your donut is gonna be a little bit dark. So yeah, there we go. All right, and then hit okay. And once we've done that, you should, I mean, it should be over there on the left-hand side, but if it doesn't pop up, you can just select it from the drop-down donut base, and there we go. So now we're in this state, look what I can do. Ooh, fancy. So, I don't know why I said it like that. But we can paint directly onto our mesh. So to understand this, because it's kind of weird, you can also paint directly over here. And you might be thinking like, well, how does it know, like, how do I know which part over here is actually going to be painted over onto the donut there? You might not care, but it's actually good to understand how it works. So basically this mesh here, it has to be unwrapped over onto this left-hand side here, because that's the only way to have a 2D texture, 2D flat image be applied to a mesh is to unwrap it in some way. I mean, there's projection, I'm not getting into that, to unwrap it. And unwrapping is essentially like, there is a meme actually that explains it. But if you have like a chocolate, right, that is wrapped in some tinfoil, if you flatten it out, that is essentially UV unwrapping. There are little places in that wrapping where there had to be a cut, right? And then that cut was wrapped around the object. That's what UV unwrapping is. So the reason this works for us is because the cuts are actually already in place for default objects. So this torus is already perfectly UV unwrapped, so we don't have to do anything. I did want to mention it though, because it's important to understand UV unwrapping. Anyways, so we could actually paint directly on here, as I mentioned. White is a little bit too extreme though. So I'm going to click that and choose a color. First of all, I'm going to select the eyedropper and then not click over here because that's got shading information. I'm going to click on the left-hand side so we get the exact color. And then I'm going to make it closer to white. So not fully white because that'll be too far, but closer to white. And I'm also going to change the strength of my brush. I'll make it about halfway. And then now I can do paints across it. And this will enable you to get a much more natural feel because you'll have, just like, in fact, I might even go a little bit softer, and that way you can kind of just paint across it. And this is very forgiving because we've got icing that's going to go over the top of it. But that's good. We don't want it to be too extreme. Let's just make it, I might go the other way, make this a little bit more saturated. Anyways, that's basically all we need to do. We just want to just dab our toes into the field of texture painting. I would say texture painting, by the way, it's one of the weaker areas of Blender. It's actually due for an update at some point in the future, but it doesn't do like, you can't paint into like the height information or the roughness information at the same time like you can with Substance Painter, but it's got basic functionality. Now, Importantly, this is an image, but it's not saved into your blend file. It still needs to be manually saved. So see at the top left-hand corner there, it's got image with a star. If you see that star, it means you've got changes that haven't been saved. So we need to go image and then save and specify where are we going to put our image. Because if we don't do this, we're going to lose it. So it has to be saved somewhere. So I'm just going to save it, anywhere. It has to be saved somewhere because it will not be saved as part of the blend file. Very important to know that. Otherwise, you can lose texture paint work that you've done. But there we go. So now to bring back everything, remember if it looks like, where's the rest of my scene gone? See the top left-hand corner? Local means it's isolated mode. So that means you just have to hit / again, and it brings back everything. And there we are. So that's the extent of this part of the tutorial. As I mentioned, some of you might be wondering, when are we going to make that lovely subsurface scattering? We're going to do that in the future after we do the sprinkles because it's too hard to see at this point. So there we go, guys. Join me in the next part, and I'll see you there.